One of the biggest stories revolving around the 2026 FIFA World Cup has been ticketing. And this is going to hit football fans the world over pretty hard because FIFA has once again hiked ticket prices. And the worrying part, it doesn't stop at tickets alone. From visa bonds to rising travel costs to teams themselves facing financial burden, the most inclusive World Cup is starting to exclude the very people it was meant for. FIFA hasn't backed down. Instead, it has pushed prices even higher. Nearly $11,000 for a final ticket. Tier 2 tickets are now being sold for over $7,000. And Tier 3 witnessing a $1,600 hike. So, from September of last year until December, that ticket cost $6,370 on FIFA's ticket website. Now, for 1 month from December until January of this year, that ticket was bumped up and it cost $8,700. Now, in the fourth and final sales window that opened just April 1st, so 5 days ago, that ticket now costs almost $11,000, $10,290. So it has increased almost $4,000. Buyer after World Cup ticket buyers accuse the entity of misleading them with stadium maps. Now, FIFA priced their tickets into 4 categories, Category 1 being the most expensive. But now, some of those Category 1 ticket holders were placed in Category 2 sections in some stadiums. The color coding was confusing. So, a lot of fans' a banner was run around the stadium at the weekend. No to ticket price increases, so the fans are following through what they said they would do. Whether it has any effect or not is another matter. Elsewhere, our friends at FIFA, the official World Cup resale site, was advertising a ticket for England's opening match against Croatia. Simon, look, when FIFA handed the 2026 hosting rights to the United States, it sold a dream of taking football to a new frontier. But that American dream is turning into a bit of a luxury package. The World Cup was supposed to be the moment soccer finally took over America, and FIFA sold us on the idea of the most inclusive tournament in history. They promised 48 teams and 3 host nations with 6 million seats available for fans from every corner of the planet to finally watch their countries compete on the biggest stage in football. That was the pitch, and that was the dream they marketed to the world. What we actually got was an $11,000 ticket listed directly on FIFA's own website through their own official sales window. This wasn't a shady reseller or a markup on StubHub, but a price set by FIFA themselves within their own system. How FIFA built the trap. To understand how this mess started, we have to look back at September of 2025 when FIFA opened the first sales window for Category 1 tickets. These are the premium seats close to the field with the best sightlines in the stadium, and the initial price sat at $6,270. While that is a massive amount of money for a single football match, you could at least argue it reflected the demand for a once-in-a-generation event happening on home soil. People complained about the cost, but they paid it and moved on. Everything changed when December arrived because that same ticket in the same category was suddenly listed for $8,700. FIFA offered no explanation or methodology to justify why the price jumped $2,300 in just a few months, and they simply called it dynamic pricing before moving on. By the time the fourth and final public sales window opened in April of 2026, that Category 1 ticket hit $10,990. A single seat increased by over $4,600 in 7 months. Yet, FIFA continues to claim that prices merely reflect the market and high demand. Derek Howard is a sports law professor at the University of San Francisco who has been digging into these pricing practices across Europe and the United States. He doesn't think high prices are inherently illegal, but he argues that FIFA's specific position makes this a unique legal problem because they aren't operating like a normal sports team. If the Dodgers play 81 home games a year, prices fluctuate based on the matchup and fans have enough information to decide if a ticket is actually worth the cost. FIFA is doing the exact opposite by acting as the only seller while controlling the entire primary market through an algorithmic system they refuse to explain. Howard believes that combining a monopoly position with opaque pricing and deliberate scarcity tactics might actually violate California antitrust law. The situation looks even worse when you look at the resale market sitting underneath the primary sales. FIFA runs their own official resale marketplace, and before new legislation forced them to pull listings in Toronto, one seller on that platform listed a Category 3 ticket for $1.5 million. That is not a typo. And the fact that an 11 million listing could exist on FIFA's own platform with no cap or review proves their secure environment for fans is anything but safe. Fox Sports analyst Alexis Liss pointed out that empty stands would look terrible for the sport in the country, but that pressure hasn't forced FIFA to lower a single price. ESPN analyst Shaw Moore captured the frustration of the fans when he said the whole situation feels like a giant cash grab aimed at people who have been saving money for 4 years. FIFA seems to believe that outrage doesn't matter as long as the demand stays high. And with 5 million tickets already sold, their gamble is paying off. The only thing that seems to matter to the organizers is that the money keeps flowing in, and so far, nothing has stopped it. The Visa bond. Nobody warned you about the ticket price is just the first wall fans hit, and the second one is waiting right at the border. For fans traveling to matches in the United States from dozens of countries, the U.S. government requires a visa bond of $15,000 just to secure entry. This isn't for your ticket or your hotel, but a bond you have to post before you've spent a single dollar on the trip itself. And you forfeit the whole thing if you overstay your visa by even a day. When you look at that number against the actual income of fans in the newly included nations, the math gets ugly fast. Senegal qualified for this tournament, and their fans are desperate to come. But the per capita income there is roughly $1,700 a year. A Senegalese fan would need to save every penny they earn for 9 straight years just to afford that visa bond. And that is before they buy a ticket, a flight from Dar, or a hotel room in an expensive U.S. host city. Algeria sits under $5,000 per capita. Ivory Coast is around $2,000, and Tunisia is about $4,290. Every one of these countries qualified, which means every one of their fans is staring down this massive financial barrier. FIFA expanded the field to 48 teams specifically to bring the Global South into the tournament, and the marketing was all about more teams, more countries, and more inclusion. Smaller nations that never had a shot at qualifying were suddenly in the mix. But what the organizers didn't tell those fans is that the financial architecture surrounding the tournament makes it functionally impossible for most of them to actually attend. The problem goes way deeper than just the bond, because FIFA failed to secure a blanket tax exemption with the U.S. government for the participating nations. This failure means smaller footballing countries like Curaçao or Cape Verde face much higher tax burdens at this tournament than England or France because they lack existing tax treaties with the United States. While the big nations use their infrastructure, legal teams, and bilateral agreements to soften the blow, the smaller nations that FIFA was loudly celebrating for qualifying end up carrying the heaviest financial weight. This isn't some accidental administrative oversight, but a system designed to extract maximum revenue while the marketing department sells a dream of inclusion that the reality can't support. Toronto fights back, and what it means. Last week, Ontario passed the Putting Fans First Act, which is a simple piece of legislation that bans reselling event tickets above face value with no exceptions. FIFA's response was incredibly fast, and they pulled every Toronto match listing from their official resale marketplace within days of the bill passing. 6 games vanished overnight, including the opening fixture for Canada against Bosnia on June 12th. And those listings didn't just move to a different site or get a price cut, they simply disappeared. This wasn't a clerical adjustment or a glitch in the system. An organization that spent months insisting its pricing model was legal and driven by demand just removed an entire city's worth of inventory the moment a government drew a hard line. FIFA blinked. And that tells us something important about what is actually possible here. Because the organization only moves when the alternative costs them more than following the rules does. The legal pressure building around this tournament is spreading far beyond the Canadian border. A European fan group has already filed a formal complaint alleging price gouging and unfair conditions. and Derek Howard expects to see movement on that case within the next few weeks. His take on the European complaint is that a success there would create a ripple effect reaching every market, including the United States, because a ruling against the way FIFA sets prices doesn't stop at a national border. It attacks the core structure of how they operate globally, and that structure is exactly the same everywhere they sell a ticket. In the US, Howard has identified 3 specific routes that could force FIFA to change its tune before the tournament even begins. State attorneys general, especially the one in California, have the standing to file under state anti-rust law and seek an injunction against the current pricing model. The president, who has treated this tournament like a personal project and stays in direct contact with FIFA president Gianni Infantino, could also just pick up the phone and end this. Finally, private consumer lawsuits modeled on the European complaint could seek both an injunction and full refunds for fans who already paid prices that Howard considers legally indefensible. We have 3 pressure points running at the same time with a hard deadline of June 11th. Ontario already showed the world what happens when one of those pressure points actually fires. So the real question is whether anyone in the US has the guts to pull the trigger before kickoff. Howard's advice to fans who are waiting for prices to drop is very direct, and he warns that without legal intervention, the data only points in one direction. More than 5 million tickets are already sold out of an expected 6 million, which means the supply is almost gone, and FIFA has no reason to lower prices when the seats are filling up anyway. Waiting for a better deal isn't a strategy. It's just a gift to FIFA. Conclusion: June 11th is the date that actually matters, and it has nothing to do with football and everything to do with the legal battles happening behind the scenes. Any rulings that come down before that deadline will either completely flip the economics of attending this tournament or just become irrelevant the second the opening whistle blows. Ontario already proved that this mechanism works because when a government finally decides to move, FIFA is forced to move right along with them. You need to keep a close eye on whether the European case gets a ruling this month and pay attention to whether any U.S. Attorney General decides to follow the lead Ontario just set. Those 2 specific decisions are what determine if the fans who built this sport actually get to sit in the stadium or if they'll be stuck watching from a screen. The moment either of those decisions drops, I will have full coverage for you right here. Hit subscribe and turn on those notifications so you don't miss the update. And make sure to drop your prediction in the comments. Do you think FIFA gets forced to cut prices before June 11th, or do they manage to run out the clock?